The views and opinions expressed by the host and our guest does not state or reflect Ramona personally or the Life Designing with Ramona Rogers podcast. This podcast takes a glimpse into the lives of women that, despite life's challenges and obstacles, they have knocked down barriers and are succeeding in their chosen careers and in life. This month, I want to focus on women in higher education. I believe they are the backbone of society, as well as their higher education institutions. By default, they are surrogate mothers to the students that are on their campuses, and they are to be celebrated. That being said, I have the pleasure of having Dr. Corinice Wilson as my guest today. Hi, Dr. Wilson.
Hello. Nice to meet everyone.
Dr. Wilson is the Dean of Retention and Engagement at Tulsa Community College. Prior to serving as Dean, Dr. Wilson was the Associate Dean for the School of Liberal Arts and Communications. Dr. Wilson provides leadership and coordination for new student orientation, academic advising, and student testing services. She also serves on the Student Success Equity Leader team. She has a long bio, but we're going to let Miss Doctor give you a lot of insights about who she is and where she comes from. But the first question is, how are you doing today, Dr. Corinice Wilson?
I'm well. I'm battling a little cold, just dealing with allergy. The season is not for the weak to be in Oklahoma. It's either hot and cold in the same day. But I'm doing well. I'm here.
All right. I like to start out with this. What is a hidden gem that you have that most people don't know about you?
No, well, that's why it's hidden, right? No, I'm just joking. So I don't tell everyone, but I love black and white movies, like old. My husband called them B movies because they're old, animated, them where some big creature is coming after you. So on a Sunday afternoon after church, like to sit on the couch and veg out with those black and white old movies.
What's your favorite one? You have a favorite?
I have a favorite. It's called Them. It's where these big ants are kind of scientific. I know, right? It's geeking out right now. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But yes, I love old black and white movies, and I don't say to tell everybody. So they'll be like, you grew up where? And you like, what? Yeah, it doesn't always mesh, but.
I remember those movies back in the day. So yeah. I'm a little dated, but I remember those movies. So when we had 2, 6, and 8.
Yes. And then when 23 came along, we're like, "Ooh, yes, we have a new television station." So yes.
Good. That's a good hidden one. So tell us your story and how you came into higher education.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much. And I am a firm believer in sharing your testimony and what's important to you. So, and I've shared this and I welcome the conversation. So grew up in North Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I went through the North Tulsa track. And I went to many individuals who may, log onto the podcast are familiar with Greeley Elementary School, where you had the best, cinnamon rolls and chili, right? I saw somebody post that on Facebook. I'm like, yes, I remember those days. But then after leaving Greeley, I went to Gilcrease Middle School, and that was a particular track into McLean High School. And many individuals weren't excited about going there. I, on the other hand, was, because my siblings went there, and I was looking forward to being a student there. And so went to McLean High School and had a wonderful experience back in high school. And was lucky enough to be a part of a program called the Scotch Program. Jimmy Scales, I often credit our trajectory, because many of my colleagues and many of my friends went to McLean High School. Great things come out of this community, right? And have went on to be, doctors and head of HR and very successful individuals. And so we were part of this program, and they exposed us to something new and different. So when Avenelli's troop would come to Tulsa Public Schools and come to McLean, they would come there. Malcolm X and his daughters would come. We would be invited to come and hear them speak. So we had those opportunities to grow as, young leaders. And so I think that's kind of ingrained in me to want to do that for other people. And after I went to McLean High School, I don't know if you remember, we played basketball against one another way back in the day. But we played, yes, I think you were like maybe a junior or something. I was a freshman. I mean, it didn't, let me just tell you, my career was short-lived in basketball. Did run track. So I just was able to experience something new and different. And while I was there, had great mentorships, had great teachers that poured into me. So Miss Harris, she's passed since then. Mrs. What's her name? Katie White. She was a basketball coach. She was another great mentor and had, of course, I mean, it's so many I can count. I mean, I can kind of name, and they'll probably be upset I didn't name them. But Mrs. Holliman was a great counselor. And so she would just gravitate and just expose me to new things. So if there was a scholarship, she would call me and say, hey, Corinice, I need you to apply for this. So I constantly had individuals pouring into me. And at the same time, participated in a program called Upper Bound. And that program is a pre-college program created through 1965. They all the kind of affirmative programs to kind of ensure that individuals who were underrepresented from underrepresented communities could go to college. And so having that exposure, went to Rogers State College at the time and was a part of Upper Bound. And so took college courses and really kind of said, you can do this. And with my mom's support, she said, I have an expectation for you to go to college. And so I went off to NSU in Tahlequah and double majored in psych and soc and psychology and sociology. And then I had an opportunity to meet Harold Aldridge, and he was a sociologist. And I said, I want to do that, right? Prior to, I think I wanted to be a police officer, be a service person. Didn't think I was going to get a boyfriend doing that. So I thought I would change it up and just be study crime. So as a sociologist, emphasis is in criminology and social psychology and social inequality. So those are my focus. And then from there, I returned back to RSU and gave back as a counselor for Upper Bound. I was a counselor for many years. And then so it allowed me to give back to former students who went to Booker T, who went to McLean, who went to Central, and even those who went to Adair. So I have these babies that they were maybe 5 years younger than I was, but I was their big counselor. So I crack up because I still call them my babies to this day. And then I went on and got my master's from OU. Don't tell anyone. I have a master's in counseling, and then I have a master's in sociology from O State. Go Pokes. Right. And then my PhD again in sociology from O State. So have always been in higher ed. But I did take a stint, and I was in nonprofit. And again, having a service kind of heart, gave back and provided service for several national nonprofits. But found my way back to higher ed through going back to RSU, Rogers State University, as executive director of TRIO programs, because I definitely believe it is our responsibility to give back. And so I went back to RSU as executive director, and then completed my PhD and said, hey, I want to teach, right? Because I do love teaching. I've always taught. I know it's hard to believe, but I have taught as an adjunct for about 18 years. Wow. So I've been in higher ed for over 26 years, either in full-time classroom or as an adjunct. And then I found my way back to TCC as an adjunct in 2014, and then as the associate dean in 2017, and have been there ever since. So find myself giving back always.
You see why I didn't read that? That sounds so much better coming from you, and your passion just comes through with you're telling that story. It's like you just lit up talking about that story.
Oh, I do.
Would you say that you are almost an exception to the rule since you started early in the game?
I did start early. Like I said, I believe once, and the key thing I think for me was to receive support and hand up, if you will. And receive information of people saying, hey, you need to always network. Don't burn bridges, right? Mm-hmm. And also build those critical relationships. And so that's what I did. And I continue to do. I reach back and mentor young men and women, even adults. I say this, like, hey, well, would you work with me on this? And I'm like, I sure will, but I have expectations. And I set those same standards that those individuals did for me. So I credit Mary Walker. She was an administrator at TCC as an educator, but I call her my second mom. And so I kind of want to emulate that greatness and continue in that vein. So just working with young people and making sure that, excuse me, that they're on the path that they choose. Mine is higher ed and again, impacting the lives of young people. One quote I always say is that, well, it's two. One, I think about quality education is the great equalizer, right? So came from a single parent household. My mom was a housekeeper, so she didn't make a lot of money, but she had expectations. So it was not an expectation that you weren't going to go to college. I mean, she was very serious about rigorous education, whether you're in high school, college. It was an expectation to do well, right?
Wow.
And so she said that for me. And then I kind of, again, try to set that for my son. Bless his heart, he's about to graduate. And I'm about to get a raise.
Oh, no more tuition, right?
Whew, no more tuition.
Well, you have just laid your life out like it went almost seamless. What are some hiccups?
Oh, no. I am so glad you said that. Oh, I've had a lot of hiccups. I mean, we talking about, I call them, everything's a learning experience. And believe me, while I'm in the middle of it, I'm praying. Let me be clear. I am praying. I'm meditating. I am crying out because it is not always easy. Being African-American woman in working in Oklahoma in higher ed at predominantly white institutions has not always been easy. When I was at RSU, I was at any given time, one or two Black African-Americans at that institution. When I say one or two, I mean one or two. We're not even talking about those who were custodians. It was just myself, right? So having to navigate that wasn't as easy. And there are always some barriers or expectations or beliefs of how a particular individual or a particular group of individuals behave and engage, and whether you want to open doors for those individuals. So it was kind of hard. So when I first left RSU, I said, no, I have expectations for something more and greater. And I was commuting, even though it was about 30, 45 minutes. I had a young child and I wanted to be closer. And so I said, I can be a therapist. I was a counselor. I can go do that for local nonprofits. And so I did that and had a great experience and I call them learning experiences. One thing I will say, I went to work for Family and Children's Services. I will never forget this. After I left RSU, I went there and I was wearing my little corporate suits, right? Because I was young, thought I would put my little suit on. And I learned then, I went into this housing apartment complex with one of my caseworkers I was supervising at the time. And I had on this little corporate business suit. And the residents there thought I was a DHS worker coming to take their kids or something not positive. So I went and I said, why aren't they responding to me? I mean, I'm so nice. And they said, oh no, change it up. You need to change your dress. And so I went back home and I changed what I was wearing. And interestingly enough, they were able to receive me and able to talk to me. And so I learned at that very moment, I don't have all the answers. I have to go and learn from those who are around me, even those who have maybe less credentials. It doesn't matter. And I would say forgot that, but just thinking as I continue to grow, right, as this professional that I have to put on a particular air or something. No. So I had to go back, change my clothes, put on some jeans, put on a sweater or a shirt, and then I was able to be received. So that was something I learned early on. And also to kind of trust people because it's not always easy. I know I've had quite a few hiccups. I've had quite a few job applications I put in and hadn't received, right? Mm-hmm. Have made mistakes on leadership. And one thing I will say, and I can't help but share this, I worked at TCC back in 2000 for 1 year. Took over a program called the Monroe Learning Center. Okay. And young 28, I said, great, this is, where I want to be. But the problem is I didn't have enough confidence in myself. And I realized this early on. I had a person who was put in my life to be a mentor, to be a leader, or, help guide me through this process as I was onboarding the staff members. And they said, you don't want to hire this person out because I'm trying to hire the big, the best and the brightest. And they said, well, no, you don't want to hire them because they can take your job. Me being young, wanting to prove myself, I'm like, oh my, you're right. And so I hired people who weren't as smart as I was. I hired an admin because they said, you should hire this person. They're going to be great for you. The admin, she didn't even know how to type on a computer. She was on a typewriter. We're talking 2000. I was like, oh my goodness. So I had to do all the work myself. I was exhausted. And at that very time, I had lost my mom. Oh. And so taking care of her, dealing with that, I was overwhelmed, right? And so I failed, right? I failed. I didn't have, even there were some great people, but they weren't great people for the positions that I had them hired in. And I realized at that very moment. So when I went to RSU, I said, as the executive director, I said, I want the best of the best of the best. I want the bright minds around me, because if I have them around me, then I know the work is going to be done. I was exhausted trying to do it all myself, staying up late at night, had my son, had my husband. I'm trying to do it all. Oh my goodness, I wasn't going to survive. So I learned then you want smart people around you all the time. And that's, I think, a testament I would want to share with anyone who's trying to climb up this ladder. Always make sure you have smart people around you. Well, and be confident.
Wow. Huh? Well, my next question for you was, what was your biggest failure? And you just
that was it. I tell you,
failure. That is awesome. That's amazing.
And it was, and I'd be very transparent. It was based upon not having enough confidence in myself, where I would have been like, oh, they could take my job. It's okay. And so now when I'm talking to my directors, when I'm talking to staff, I said, I want you to be prepared to take my job, because tomorrow's not promised. And let's be clear, at any given time when you leave, if you should leave this earth, let me say they may mourn, but 2 weeks later, they need to fill that position. And so I need to make sure, and I think I hold myself accountable into ensuring that my immediate direct reports can step into my shoes, whether it is because by design, if I move up or I move to another position or something happens. I don't like it when nothing can be done if I'm not there. That's not a good example of a true leader for me. I don't want to offend anybody else who's watching.
Oh, well, that is so crucial, because I see people that don't too much care about grooming the next person in order to make sure the operation is functionable in the case of an absence. And so you are to be commended for that. My next thing I want to ask you is, what are some myths that you want to debunk about the profession and higher ed and what you're doing?
Well, I don't know per se myths. Let me say this. It's not a quick fix. It's not an easy fix. I feel bad because you have individuals who think I'm going to come here, get this degree, and it's going to happen for me overnight. If that was the case, I would have been a dean 10 years ago, right? That is not the case. And not just talking about as you grow in your profession, but as you complete your degree. It takes time, and not just time to, take these particular classes, but to really grow and open your mind to new and different things. I remember sitting in humanities class saying, why do I need this class? But I now understand the importance of the musical notes that the professor was playing, and how that kind of cultivates your ability to think and process certain kind of dynamics. If you're looking at like a major problem, such as trying to look at scheduling and during a pandemic, right? And immediately being able to process that, because you can get bogged down or overwhelmed with just how all the notes are playing, right? If you look at a symphony, but if you understand how they're integrated in enough to make something so beautiful, then you can take time to say, okay, how can we ensure that students continue to learn, that staff continue to provide, work, provide a service, faculty able to teach in a way that is seamless and in a way that everyone continues to benefit and grow. And that wasn't an easy task. And it took a team to do that. And I think sometimes people don't realize it does. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Even our discussion right now, sharing information, I can't do it by myself, right? It takes a dance or an integrated kind of rhythm and flow in order to kind of just share this information. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I think about the importance of what we do. And so, as you say, debunk this myth. It's not an easy fix, whether you're doing the job or whether you're in the process of growing as a student.
Wow. Dropping lots of nuggets today, Dr. Corinice.
Hey, this is my experience. Believe me, I wish it was an easy, quick fix to doing life and to doing education, but it's not. Even as we're talking about, let me just log in and get a certificate. As much as we would love to, it doesn't happen that way.
With you said something a second ago. Pandemic. How does that affect operations, employees, people being employed, student retention? What
my goodness.
Things that you guys have had to deal with because of the pandemic?
Learning how to be flexible. And the one thing is, I think about grace. I think it was hard for many in this arena of higher ed to really extend grace, not only to our colleagues, to students. We had to learn that. It was hard. You're just, as a lecturer, as an intellect, you're like, hey, I'm going to give you these, like you said, these nuggets, and you're going to just take them and just run with them. And I'm going to give, and I have an expectation of a 20-page paper at the end of the semester, right? Or at the beginning of this. You know what I mean? We had these grandiose, this very rigid kind of formality in how we transfer knowledge. And the pandemic said, wait a minute. It was a couple of things. Like I said, extending grace to your peers, to your students, but also understanding that we had to be flexible, right? In providing our interaction with technology. I mean, how many of us actually were doing Zoom like we're doing now, right? And so having classes, I've taught a class via Zoom and having students in person since the pandemic has started. So I think we've learned to think, I don't want to say think outside the box. I had Dr. Baker, a professor at TCC, has said, why do we keep saying outside the box? How about just break down the box? Why do we have to have a box at all? And so we've been able to do this. This pandemic has shaped and transformed how we transfer knowledge, how we engage one another, and again, having grace. And one thing too, I think having an awareness of mental health.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we really conceived is specifically, and especially for our African American community. I'm a firm believer in when you're isolated. We had to learn how to just get outside ourselves. I mean, talk to a therapist via Zoom. I mean, because you were experiencing a lot. I mean, a lot of marriages didn't quite make it. I remember I told my husband, hey, you go to one room, I go to the other. I see you at 5:00. Because pandemic, I mean, mental health is real. And so it became very evident during this time of isolation. Wow. So that's how we got through. I promise you, grace, flexibility, and appreciation for technology. And that's how we were able to pivot.
Wow. So for somebody looking to get into higher education, what is some advice you would give them that how they can maneuver?
Well, it's a couple of things because the landscape has changed so much. And I often talk about, just matter of fact, I had a young lady who had saw my picture up somewhere at TCC, and she said, hey, I want to talk to you about getting into higher ed. And I was very transparent and very direct. I said, well, what area are you focused on? Is it student affairs or is it academic affairs? I think about it, if you think about the Senate and Congress, kind of how they're two forms of the House. Okay. And so if you wanted to impact students through engagement, through advising, through student life activities, mental health, or student conduct, we have those different arenas. So you would focus in on areas of higher education leadership. You would focus in on psychology, sociology, clinical psych. You can do all of that there and then kind of go up the ladder and grow. Many individuals start as a counselor and then move into the role of director. Just that's why I said it takes time sometimes to kind of move up the ranks. But also on the academic side, my area is psychology and sociology. And through higher learning commissions, you have various commissions across the country that commissions or give accreditation to various schools. And so they have set criteria. So if you're teaching psychology, you must have a psychology degree. If you're teaching history, you must have a master's in history. If you're teaching mathematics, you must have a master's. So you have to have a particular degree within the area of your focus. And so the interesting thing for some of us who major in psychology, sociology, you could serve on both sides of the house, right? But I'm very direct with saying, if you said, hey, I think I want to get my master's in leadership, I'm like, well, okay, so that means you're going to be on the side of student affairs side, because you have to be very specific in a particular discipline or area, department of study, in order to move up as faculty or as a dean or as an administrator.
So a lot of arenas.
A lot of arenas, yes.
A lot of arenas.
And there are a few of us who have been a professor, who've been on the academic side, that can also transfer. And I say, if you're considering that, it makes you well-rounded, right? Okay. So I look forward. My experiences of dealing with assessment, as a faculty supervisor, working with faculty, not as a supervisor, really your colleague, because faculty, they have their PhDs as well. So you have all of that. So you can do both. So
that's
just having that.
Bless you.
But you can also teach. So you know what? You can teach. So if you have your master's in leadership, we have various courses that you can teach, like college success. Because all of us who have advanced degrees know how to navigate this higher education system, even from a personal lens. And so your story can also aid other students, right? And so I would say sharing that information is one of the greatest assets that anyone has. And so you could teach, anybody with a master's who have interest in teaching can teach, and also in our Dev Ed. So we have, Dev Ed courses, individuals who, sorry, my nose has stopped. I was just thinking, so some of our Dev Ed, but they do have some level of, being specific in the areas of reading and writing, but you can just have a master's, and it doesn't have to be that specific to maybe teach in those areas. Okay. So you can start there and continue to grow.
Wow. Knowing what you know now about the higher ed terrain, what would be some advice you would give your younger self?
Oh, my goodness. You know what? I think I had to be perfectly transparent. I was a bit cocky back in the day. I thought I knew it all and had the plan, and I didn't take the hiccups very well. So I would tell myself to enjoy the journey, but not be as it has to be step by step by step. I was in school for quite a while, to be honest. You saw the resume. I've been in school for a while. I may not have went kind of in those that kind of route, if you will. I probably would have just did my master's in sociology and PhD and would have just stopped there. But I wouldn't take anything back. But I will say I probably wouldn't be as bit cocky as I was in the beginning, because I didn't like when they told me no. I didn't like that. I was like, what do you mean? No, don't you want me to be president for your college or something? Right.
Wow. So yeah. What is next for you?
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I think about, and as I turn the big 50 next year, I can't help but think about continuing to impact the lives of others, but I want to do it in a way that's more meaningful. So for me, next steps, could it be going back to the classroom? It could be. I have to admit, my passion, I love teaching. I love teaching students and opening up their eyes and having a new perspective, showing how we're all integrated and how there's a level of interdependence when you think about education, health, government, how that impacts the family, right? An ecological system that I think sometimes we just think we're just existing, and we don't think about how all these other things. So when you think about even inflation right now, you're like, why is it that because of these ship barge and barges not moving, cargo is not getting to these different places. Why is that impacting us? And so you think about government regulations, you think about how all of these other macro level entities are affecting the individual and the family. And so I love kind of, exposing students to that and, seeing them light up. And so they're like, oh, okay. And it doesn't help that it's from a Black woman. So I love that even more because they're able to see and engage, and I can make it kind of come to life for them. So I may go back to the classroom, but I never want to be the president. And let me say this is because I truly believe in being my authentic self. And I know this is recorded, but I am a firm believer. And if I want to have a glass of wine in public, well, I don't mean in public, but if I'm at an establishment, I want to be able to do that. I believe in being my authentic self. And I think it allows me to be real, not only with myself, but with people who I'm around. So whether it is engaging in the custodian, Mr. Anthony, who is at TCC, or whether it is talking to Governor Stitt, I believe in being my authentic self. And I think in certain arenas, you can't always do that. And so I want to make sure I am being true to myself. So whether it's in a classroom or a peer administrator, I want to do that, but definitely just want to ensure that I'm impacting the lives of individuals and specifically students who are underrepresented. So whether it be racial or ethnic or LGBTQ or those who have religious differences, I want to make sure that I am impacting their lives and making sure that they understand that they have a voice in this process. So that's what's most important to me.
Leaving that legacy. That is so important.
That's what it's all about. And that's why I said it's not wealth. I mean, you can leave wealth, but it's like when I think about, and I'm glad you said that. For me, I said, man, my mom, she didn't leave us a lot, but she left us such a legacy of integrity and of service. I count that as being a millionaire because I'm able to leave that and share that with others. So it's about service and just exposing somebody to something new and different. And that's what you said, my legacy. That's what I hope when they say between the dashes that I'm able to kind of create that for other people.
That is awesome. One last question.
Okay.
I'm trying all this podcast is about women living their life by design and the things and the terrains that they have to maneuver to get there. Mm-hmm. What does live life by design mean to you?
Oh, wow. And it's so personal. He said, live life by design, because I have to think about whose design is it, right? And I'm a firm believer in his will would be done. And so I want to live purposefully in my authentic self that reflects who he is. And this is what I said. My other quote is to be an example for others to follow. And so if I'm able to do that, I'm living my life by design. Right? So being an example for others to follow. So whether it be in higher ed or whether it be in giving service to the community, that's what it's about, right? And that's by design. And I think it's going back to my father, my mother, they were always about being an example, right? My dad worked hard, plowing. I mean, he was plowing fields at 7 years old. He just recently passed, but when I think about his work ethic, oh my goodness. And so he poured that into me. My mom's determination, her tenacity, that was poured into me. That was by design. It wasn't them that did that, right? It wasn't their parents. It wasn't their parents' parents. But where did they get that from? And I think about our religious, my Christianity, and that's what I lean towards. And so when I say by design, he brought them together, right? And that is what has been poured into me. So living my life by design is, again, just to be of service and to be an example for others to follow. So that's what it means to me.
Standing ovation.
Oh, no. Thank you.
You're an amazing, amazing woman. And every institution, whoever comes into your space, I'm sure they leave your space overjoyed and with something that can make their lives better. And,
thank you.
I'm so happy that I've had the opportunity to interview Dr. Corinice Wilson.
Thank you.
Seeing you again, and we're going to catch up on another time. But this is the Life by Design podcast with Dr. Corinice Wilson.
Thank you. This is amazing. Thank you. I'm telling you, I love to share. I love to talk. So see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.